Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday. Thanks so much for joining us again today. I'm your host, Arthi Dorton. I'm AARP's Associate State Director for Outreach for Lower Alabama area. And this week, we are going to be talking about Black history in Mobile. And as someone who is born and raised and works out of Mobile, I'm really excited about this episode. And if you didn't catch our episodes on Birmingham or Montgomery, you can always go back and watch them on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. They're recorded and you can go back and look at them anytime. And those are great episodes as well. As always, please feel free to ask any relevant questions in the comment section, and we'll try to address those at the end of each broadcast. And also, any of the information or slides that you see, we'll add them to the comment section on the Facebook feed of this broadcast, so you'll have them for reference. Today, I am really excited to be joined by Eric Finley. He is the docent for the Dora Franklin-Finley African American Historical Trail. And Eric and I have worked together for a few years now, and I can say two things for sure about Eric. One thing, he is one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met, one of the greatest storytellers I've ever met, and I've always learned something new and fascinating from him every time I talk to him. And then the second thing is he has become such a great friend to me and to AARP. So we're really, really honored to have him with us today. Eric, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's see.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I must say that it's a real privilege, and we are very, very happy to be in partnership with the AARP group here in Mobile. They provide just an enormous and great services to the local community. So we're always excited to be with them. And it's a pleasure to be able to present this history to the listener today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric. And can you tell us a little bit about the Dora Franklin-Finley Trail and kind of the history of how it came about?
Sure. This is actually our 16th year for doing these tours. And they actually started about 5 years before that. We had an African-American city councilman here in Mobile that was on a chamber business trip to Boston, Massachusetts. And while he was there, he saw a sign that said Black Heritage Trail. And he decided that he had that tour. And he enjoyed it. And on his way back to Mobile, he thought that this would be something that we could do here in Mobile, because Mobile was close to 300 years old. And he had often heard his parents talk about the successful Blacks in the community as far back as the 1870s that were entrepreneurs and business people. And so he started looking around the city for someone to take on the opportunity or the challenge, just depending upon the perspective that they looked at it from. Well, after searching, after about 9 months, he found a young lady that said she would take on the opportunity. And her name was Dora Franklin-Finley. Now, Dora, double first cousin, and I will tell you that's another tour. We're not going to take that one today, okay? But Dora spent 5 years of doing research of African-American places and people that had made significant contributions to the city of Mobile. Well, I always say that Dora was blessed because during the time we had an African-American mayor, Samuel Jones, we had 3 African-Americans on the city council, and we had an African-American county commissioner, attorney Masiri Leggett, who is still the county commissioner. And so I say she was blessed because there was a lot of questions as to the significance of an African-American trail. We gotta understand this was prior to these trails and museums being on the marquee like they are today. Mm-hmm. But she had individuals in leadership positions that could answer those questions, and it allowed her time to do the research and design the trail. And when she finished, we had 39 markers, historical markers throughout the city of Mobile.
That's amazing. That's so great. And what a wonderful legacy she leaves, and what a wonderful way for your family to carry it on for her as well. And so tell us a little bit, we've got a slide up here to kind of tell about the objectives of the trail. Can you kind of go over those real quickly with us?
Yeah, well, let me say this. We are a organization, 501c3, and there are 8 other board members along with myself. Our president is Judge Carlos Finley. Our vice president is Miss Medina Trenier, and our treasurer is Dr. Coleridge Franklin. Miss Marcia Hall is a member. Dr. Cheryl Franklin is a member, and we all play an important role in keeping this organization alive and growing. We are still finding new, you might say, we're unveiling history even today, and we will. We have 2 markers right now that's being vetted and validated by the Mobile and Alabama Historical Society. So every marker is not just our research, but it is research that is validated and vetted by the historical societies in the state. And you know, we primarily want to preserve history, bring history to the surface that's not taught in the schools. We know that this is Black History Month, but we do history 12 months a year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so great. And I know you and I right now are talking about doing some more Zoom presentations in the future to teach people about this all year round, not just in February, but like you said, all year round. And you know, it's so good to know. I'm showing that you know, the history comes alive with the Dora Franklin-Finley African American Heritage Trail. And as somebody who has been on this trail and done the tour with you pre-pandemic wise several times, it's just a fascinating tour. Every time I've gone, I've learned several new things. You're such a great storyteller, and it's such a great asset to our community and to our state. You know, so I have to ask, because I know there's like, there's like 41 markers. Is that correct now? And like you said, it's growing every day. Can you tell me?
That's right.
Can you pick 2 or 3 of your favorite stories out of just, you know, out of all of the stories that you've got? What are 2 or 3 of your favorites?
Now that's a challenge. That's a challenge because all of them are my favorite. You know, well, of course, right now, because of the pandemic, we're not doing the coach tours, the riding tours. We do a 2-hour tour, but we are doing walking tours. And if I had to think about a couple of my favorites, I kind of tailor it to the group. If I'm working with students, I probably would like the Hidden Figures. And the Hidden Figures marker is down on Boffin and Claiborne Street. And so that is the wall of what some Mobilians might remember as the old Boggy building. And today, the Mobile Police Precinct was in there recently, but it's right across from the Immaculate Conception Basilica Cathedral. And so this was based off of a partnership with United Mobile. And these 3 individuals were selected kind of in parallel to the movie of the African-American ladies that worked with NASA that did all of the background mathematical work for the spaceship going into space. And so these are Hidden Figures in Mobile. And the first picture of the young lady with the military uniform on is a lady by the name of Dr. Regina Benjamin. And most people will know Dr. Benjamin as she was the premier doctor during the President Barack Obama's administration. She was the chief surgeon for the United States. And Dr. Benjamin actually grew up right here in Mobile, in the north side of Mobile, around an area that we call Davis Avenue, Dr. Martin Luther King Avenue. And she attended Xavier University, and she became a physician and was selected as the general surgeon during the President Barack Obama's administration. Now, she has a clinic that is located in Bayou La Battery area of Mobile. And so she's providing services prior to that as well as now to the community. And so she was one of those jewels that became very successful. The next gentleman is a gentleman by the name of Lonnie Johnson. Lonnie Johnson attended a local high school here in Mobile, Williamson High School, and he was known for setting the labs on fire and burning his mother's kitchen up because he was always mixing up things, trying to make some new project. And he ultimately ended up at Tuskegee University, where he initially tested as not being accepted, but did attend the university. He eventually earned a PhD in engineering. He worked on the B-2 stealth bomber as well as with NASA. And then he invented the Super Soaker, which most kids know as the water gun that will skirt water across the park. And it was a very popular toy that amassed him millions of dollars. And for him to grow up in this community and to attend a school that should not produce a product like him is amazing. And just recently, in the past couple of years, he actually returned a check to that school for multiple millions of dollars to establish a robotics school. So he is, again, a hidden figure that's doing enormous amount of work throughout the country. In fact, he has over 100 patents right now, and his office is in Atlanta, Georgia, where he's doing tremendous things. The last gentleman is a gentleman by the name of Gary Cooper. And Gary Cooper attended school at one of our local parochial schools, Most Pure Heart of Mary, and graduated. Then he went to Notre Dame and finished Notre Dame and volunteered for the Marines, where he became a director of an artillery group, which could be as many as 10,000 men. He was the first African American to accomplish that. He served 2 stints in Vietnam, earned several gold medals. He's a major general now. The Air Force called him back for 2 to 4 years, where he served in the Air Force. Then he returned home. He was appointed to ambassador of Jamaica for 6 years. After that, he returned back and they asked him to be head of the Department of Human Resources for the state of Alabama, which he did for a number of years. Then he returned back to Mobile, and the district that he lives in elected him as a state legislature, which he served in the state legislature for several years. And he returned back to Mobile as president and CEO of Commonwealth National Bank. He recently just retired, and now he just manages his family's mortuary business, which is Christian Benevolent Funeral Home. So those are just a few of the jewels. There are many more, but those are the ones that are highlighted on that particular marker.
Yes, and I think one thing that really stood out to me as you were telling that story, and for all so many of the stories that you tell about the individuals in this history is that they come back and they give back to this community. And really, this community down here in Mobile and for anywhere, it's so much better because of them. Like you said, with Lonnie Johnson and Williamson High School, and Dr. Benjamin with her Bayou Clinic, which I've been familiar with and worked with before. It's just so wonderful that they've come back and they've contributed so much to this community. They really are our heroes down here. Okay, so that was a great start of story. So do you have another one for us?
Well, I do. There's a gentleman by the name of Dave Patton, and Dave Patton back in the 1800s had a wagon and a mule, and he hauled dirt all around the city of Mobile. He laid the foundation for most of the streets. He laid the foundation for Murphy High School, which was the largest high school in the city of Mobile. He was initially called the trash man. And after he started to construct in the streets, he laid the foundation for the Alabama State Docks. He became one of the richest entrepreneurs in the city of Mobile. He built this very large, beautiful home in 1900 on Davis Avenue. Folklore has it that he initially wanted to build his house on Government Street because it rivals any of the antebellum homes that are on Government Street and Dolphin Street, but the community would not allow him because he was Black to build that house. And he completed that house over on Davis Avenue, where it still exists today. He ultimately laid the he along with his contractors removed all of the dirt out of the bulkhead tunnel here in Mobile, and that was an enormous project that took place that he did with mules and horses when that tunnel was constructed. Unfortunately, he died at a very young age. He was only about 47 years old when he passed, so he didn't get a chance to realize the fruits of his labor. But to me, what I most like about this particular individual is that we're able to communicate to the young adults how this young man did not have any mentors, but became very successful because he was determined to be successful, and he was during his lifetime.
Absolutely, absolutely. He overcame great odds, and he did it with his smarts and his perseverance, and that's wonderful. I love that story. And then I know you had one more. I think the UNESCO marker. I think this is a really great thing to touch on real quick as well. Can you tell us about this marker real quick?
Yes, the UNESCO marker is down at Cooper Riverside Park, and as you all may or may not know, UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and they have a project where they're going to recognize and remember every port of entry that enslaved individuals were brought to during the Middle Passages. And Mobile, we are being recognized right now, as you all might know, for Clotilda.
Mm-hmm.
There were many ships that arrived in Mobile. The Clotilda was the last ship to bring in illegally kidnapped, enslaved individuals in 1859. But prior to that, there were ships that we've been able to document. Okay, there were probably many that we could not document, but we did document that back in 1721, that was the African ship that came into Mobile with actually it left Africa with 240 kidnapped individuals. When it arrived, it only had 120. Okay, so we know that during the course of that trip, there were 120 that either died, committed suicide, or killed. Okay, there was also the Maria, which left Africa with actually 338 people, and it arrived in Mobile with 338. And then that was the Neride, which was 350 departure, arrived in with 238. So this marker is only the third marker that's been actually installed since the United Nations have started this recognition of the ports of entry, and that's our marker, which is down at Cooper Riverside Park.
That's so great to have that, and to, you know, honor the memory of those folks that came through, you know. And it's like you said, you know, we've heard a lot about the Clotilda because it is the last slave ship, and it was recently discovered in the Delta, which has been a really exciting thing for us in Mobile and surrounding communities like Africatown, which is where a lot of the descendants of Clotilda landed. But it's also important to remember that there were other ships, too many other ships that came through. And I'm so glad that it was recognized. So we actually have a question that's a perfect segue into my next question. Ann Hales asked, the Clotilda was the last ship to bring slaves into Mobile. Was it the last ship in the whole United States?
And the answer is yes. It was the last ship to come into the U.S. with illegally kidnapped individuals in 1860. And if I could, just for significance, the Slave Act of 1808 was passed. And that Slave Act said that it was illegal to import anyone from outside of the U.S. And if you were caught, you could, and found guilty by a jury, you could be hung. But there were individuals that were daring, and they continued to make these voyages. This particular voyage was based off of a bet. One of the local rich white plantations owners by the name of Timothy Maher made a bet with another rich white plantation owner that he could bring in 100 illegally kidnapped individuals to the U.S. It was a significant bet. And so he actually went out and hired a guy by the name of Captain Foster. And Captain Foster hired 11 crewmen, and they constructed this schooner. It was an 86-foot schooner that they called the Clotilda. And they leave out the port of Mobile with 76 yards of lumber. And it looked as if they were going to South America or Houston to sell that lumber. But instead, what they did was that they built 130 slots underneath that schooner to bring back the individuals that they were going to purchase when they got to Africa. But I know that's more than what that individual asked for, but I wanted to share that with you. And there's more to the story.
Yes, there's much more to the story. And, you know, it's a horrible story. And it's also something that we have to remember. And I think, you know, one of the things I think that Dora said in her own words was we can't know where we are going until we know where we've been. And I think this is a perfect example of what she meant by that. You know, and now that we have this discovery of the Clotilda, as hard as its history is for the descendants of the people who came into it, I think that this is an opportunity to really celebrate them and celebrate the memory of their descendants. And so it's a really exciting, like I said, it's horrible, but it's also at this time exciting to know that we've been able to find this part of history, and we're able to preserve it, and we're able to share it in an honest manner. And I think that's really important. And I want to thank you so much, Eric, for sharing that, because you're right. There's a lot more to the story. And I know that you have a lot more on your website, and we'll probably talk about it when we do some of our Zoom presentations, our Zoom series that we're working on developing right now. So, it's really great. And I do want to point out too that the Dora Franklin-Finley African American Historical Trail, you'll see it scrolling down below. That's the website. And you can find this information as well. Again, Eric, thank you so much for sharing this stuff with us. I think you and your family and the board of the historical trail have just done a brilliant job teaching us, about where we're going, about where we've been, so we know where we're going. And, I know that's been especially hard during the pandemic. I know I've missed your tours. I know a lot of our AARP members have missed your tours. But again, with your website and everything, what are some ways that people can continue to safely learn about Black history in Mobile?
Well, first of all, there's a lot right now that's going on in Africa Town with the discovery of the Clotilda. And we're going to see Mobile become a destination. It is just extremely exciting of the history. And I happened to be present when the engineers and the divers actually validated that was the Clotilda, because you see, that story has been a myth for 160 years. Those families, those descendants, they are fourth, fifth generation families that live in Mobile and all over the country. They had been told all of their lives that it was not true, but they knew from their families that they did come in on that ship. And when it was actually validated, it's just something that I can't express in words. You'd have to have been there to see and feel what those families finally said. The rest of the world will know that that's how their ancestors got here. So the story is, yes, the Clotilda is you might say, the low-hanging fruit, but the real story is about those 110 individuals that came to this country, families being divided, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, and they made a way out of no way. And they survived, they thrived under the most harsh conditions of economic, social, and environmental injustices imposed on them for the community that they lived in. And so that story right now being developed. There's a lot of economic development plans that are being made. We just turned dirt last week on the Heritage House, and that museum is going to house artifacts from the Clotilda that those divers brought back. It's scheduled to open in August, September timeframe of this year. There's a welcome center that's on the plans to be developed. And then there's other things that I never steal anyone's thunder to be released, but we're going to see some exciting projects around the history of those individuals, because it's a very unique story in that during the Middle Passages, there were over 25,000 voyages from Africa. And we know that 12.5 million people were transported. 2.5 million never made it. But there were 13 ships that we actually know where they exist. And 12 of them are in South America, in places like Haiti, Brazil, Cuba. There's only one in the United States. And it's right here. And that's the Clotilda. So there's much more that we'll be able to share with everyone as we develop this story on the Clotilda. Let me say this. It's being told by the descendants. There is a descendants group here of those individuals that came in on the Clotilda. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of a griot story in some cases,
Mhm.
where it's been word of mouth from generation to generation. But we are
Mhm.
just all bubbling with the
Mhm.
potential.
It really is. It's so exciting, and I'm so glad that you said that their descendants are the ones who are getting to tell this story. It's just it's so exciting to be down here and be in this moment, even if we're in a pandemic. But it's great to hear all of this stuff. And like I said, I know you and I will probably be, or really you and the board members of the tour or the trail will be talking about it more in depth in some of our upcoming Zooms, which will, as soon as we get those developed, folks, we will let you know about those. We're in development right now with those, but it's so exciting. And we want to make sure that everyone knows again, to go to the Dora Franklin-Finley African American Historical Trail website. It's scrolling down there at the bottom of your screen, and it's a great website. It's very well done. I know Eric has done some great stuff with the city of Mobile for the Black History Month. I've been watching your Facebook, the little Facebook snippets on Black history that y'all have been working on. Those are really enjoyable. So there's so much. There's 41 markers. There's so many stories. I my a couple of my favorites are, learning about Cudjoe Kazula Lewis, who was, I believe, the last slave, and his descendants who live in Africatown. He actually came over on the Clotilda, and there's actual early footage of interview with him and books about this history. So I encourage anyone to look this up and reference the Dora Franklin-Finley Historical Trail and learn about this history. It's just so rich. Another one of my favorite stories, and I'm not going to give them all away, but one of my other favorite stories is just a little teaser. But Wallace Turnage, the slave who escaped by going south instead of north. I just think that that's a great story, and his life was fascinating, and how he escaped was fascinating. And Eric, I just am so delighted you could join us today and tell us about the trail and tell us just a tiny little snippet of the history that Mobile has in honor of Black History Month. And like I said, I hope we can continue teaching folks virtually and hopefully eventually back in person as long as we can. So thank you.
So if I could, just a couple of comments.
Sure.
Um, this history is living, and
Yes.
just recently we found out. Up until about a year ago, we always said that Cudjoe Kazula Lewis was the last surviving member of the Clotilda.
Mhm.
He was 95 years old and passed in 1935. Well, there's a
Mhm.
UK author that her name is Durkin. She had been doing research, because when the Clotilda came here, a third of them stayed here, a third went to Selma, and then there was a third that scattered um, all the way up Highway 45 and 43. Well,
Mhm.
this author out of the UK found out that one of the individuals was 2 years old, believe it or not. 2 years old that
Oh,
traveled. And that young lady lived 2 years. She lived longer than Cudjoe Lewis. She actually
wow.
lived to 1940.
Wow,
So
breaking news.
what
Okay.
happened was that they changed her name. Yeah, they changed her name. Her African
Oh,
name was Redanish, Redashi,
okay.
and they changed it to Sally Smith, forced her to marry one of the enslaved men, and she worked for this
Mm,
white plantation owner who ultimately became president of a bank in Selma. But
mm.
and the other one was a lady by the name of Miss McCrary, and they lived actually longer than Cudjoe Lewis. So we're having to put a footnote on all
Right.
of the information now as a
Well, that is,
result of that, which is good.
yeah,
You know,
no.
right.
And like you said, it
So,
always changes and
so
we're always learning. So,
right. And so, real quick though, you know, we kind of like to summarize the tours because the last couple of years have been kind of chaotic, and when we do tours, we like to say some parts of it may be a little uncomfortable, but these are things that happen. We tell the history. I didn't live back in the 1800s, nor do any of the guests, but for some of us to understand the spectrum, we have to understand everything from slavery to mass incarceration to Jim Crow days to right on up through 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education to 64 with the Civil Rights Bill passing. And then, you know, if we could have those you know, explicit, implicit type conversations. At the end of the day, we're going to have that reconciliation. We're going to have that hopefully that we can have that understanding that we are all human. And it's just sometimes we're sitting across the table instead of around the table, and when we start to communicating and sharing with one another these differences and talk about them until they're not different anymore. It makes it much easier to get up in the morning and go about our daily lives. So that's what we do. You know, if we're working with the children, it's more of this is how you become successful. It's a process, and these are individuals that accomplish that. But primarily, that's what we do on the trail, is preserving, making people aware of the history that they just didn't know all these jewels existed here in the city of Mobile. And Dorothy, you know, I could continue to talk about the baseball players and the principals of the different schools and the pharmacists and the doctors and go on and on and on. And we love it. We actually love it.
And I do too. And like I said, I'm really excited that hopefully we can get more into deep dives of all of those things in some future Zoom series. And again, stay tuned for that, folks. We're working on those. But Eric, what you and the board of the trail do is so important, and you do it so well. You do tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we all need to hear it. And you say it, you do it honestly and truthfully, and you do it in a way that celebrates the perseverance of people who have not always been celebrated. And, you know, for that, it's an honor to be able to work with you and like I said, to have you on today. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we appreciate AARP.
Well, thank you, Eric. All right, everybody, that concludes our Wisdom Wednesday this week. So stay tuned for our quick event video. Wisdom Wednesday will be back next week. It'll probably be just a real quick short update just of what our events are and answer any questions anyone may have. So again, we want to thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for our video, and have a great one.